Alright. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to mix up a little bit more of the Micro Vein Red, just as almost a wash. A little more color than a wash, but not much more. So this is what it's basically going to look like. Because again, I want to be using all of the paint that's going to be rolling down, and I'm going to be modeling. So I want to make sure there's no clumps in that. And there's no clumps in that. I decided to add a little bit of pink modeling to the Serenity kit. This is going to be even a little more plush of a look. We want the skin to look like if you touch it, you can press it in. We want it to be very three-dimensional. One of the ways we get this three-dimensional look is by highlighting the creases. Highlighting the creases really brings out that three-dimensional quality. Okay. So I feel like that looks pretty good. I'm just going to do the same with the legs. So this is what this layer looks like. And then right on the sole of the foot in the pale part, I'm just going to make one tiny little floop. What is that for? That actually adds just enough pink to be able to get the blue to overlay it and look very natural. Much more pink than that, you're going to run the risk of reddening it too much, and then the blues are not going to look natural. Again on this foot, I'm going to just put it right there on that white part and then pull away. This is going to add just enough color. And then I'm going to bake. So my Liam has baked. She's nice and done. She is not still hot. She's a little bit cool. So she's ready to be worked on again. Okay. And so I am quite happy with where I am right now with this Liam kit. The last layer that I did, which was the Micro Vein Red watered down, has blended the skin tones in to where now I feel like I can do another blue wash and then a little bit more blue actual modeling. You don't have to do the blue modeling. I like to do the blue modeling because I feel like it really makes people look twice to have that degree of color going on in the sculpt. So this is blue that I've had mixed for a little while. I usually just cover it with plastic and then just water it down. With paint thinner, of course. Make sure you mix it really well if you do allow it to dry out a little bit because it can get clumpy. Alright, so that's our blue. I've got my brush that I like to use for the blue wash, and I've got a brand new blue wash that I just made up this afternoon, so I'm just going to stir it up a little bit, make sure I don't get clumps. Last thing you want to happen when you're doing a blue wash, as I said before, is that you have it too thick and you end up getting way too much unnatural blue in your baby. I think this is going to work just fine. Sometimes I even go a little bit overboard and I just let it go where it wants. And then I'll flip the head upright, and then you've got some of these little runs that will start doing a vein pattern for you, and you don't even have to do anything with it. It's just there already. I'm going to remove the blue from the nostrils, so we don't want that. Remove the blue extra from the mouth and the creases of the lips. So we'll suck it back out of the ears. And there we are. So I don't want to pull out the blue that I have that's crept into these corners of the eye. Okay? Instead, I want to add a little more there. So I'm just going to go over this. And then just pull out the extra paint. So this is what I'm ending up with. I have some really nice modeling that's happened up here. I have some of the blue undertones coming through the paint. And now I'm ready to add I believe, what will be the final layer of the blue veining to my doll kit. I want to get rid of all the purples and the pinks out of my sponge. Now this is kind of watery. This is running pretty thin. And that's okay, because I would rather have it for her skin tone be a little too subtle than to be way too powerful. So you're not going to see a tremendous amount of change at first. This gives me a little more control. So I put a little bit of the blue down here on the cheeks, but then I'm going to pull that away again. And I'm just going to leave a couple of little tiny traces of the blue here so that it looks like she's got just a couple of little veins showing through there at the ear. It's a really nice effect to get. And then I'm going to go over with just a little bit thicker paint. I'm going to do up here, all along this forehead. It's a little too much for my taste, so I'm going to take a little bit of that out. Just very softly. Very softly. I'm just going to keep working with it until I get the effect that I'm looking for. I'm going to go back to my dilapidated brush, and I'm going to mop up all of this thicker paint that's kind of sticking up at the top where it ran down, and pull just a little bit of fresh paint. Then I'm going to go over the eyes, eyelids. So this can look like your baby has a little bit of veining going on, the little vessels in the eyelids. That is a really desirable effect you do want. There's been a trend in recent years to have the dolls looking kind of overly veiny. That's not my personal preference, but definitely you want some. I used to offer basic babies, which were babies that are not this detailed, but honestly, I want to grow my skills, and in order to do that I need to be able to practice on more of the hyper-realistic paint jobs. So if anyone was wondering why I've changed that, that's why. Because I want to have more practice with the hyper-realistic paints. So then I'm going to just pull a foot here, and it's already dry as you can see. I'm going to use my dilapidated brush, catch a little bitty bit, and then I'm just going to squish it on here like this. Now you can absolutely blend that down with your dry brush. I particularly like to do that around the edges because I don't want like a blue line. So if you can see that, you can see that there's just a nice hinting of blue there. Nothing too dark. Same thing on this foot. Just going to add in my blue. Sometimes I will actually use the darker blue, but because this baby has such thin skin and she's so fair, I really don't want to use the dark blue because I feel like that would overpower this pale part. And I don't want that to happen. Then I'm going to do the palms of the hands. Just a little dollop right there. So if you can see that. And then I'm going to go back in and I'm going to pull out what I don't want. And I'm just going to soften the edges of the blue because I don't want the blue to have lines. I just want it to fade into the pinks. And these pinks are going to be darkened up as I go, but I want this blue to be able to show through even after I've done the darkening. So that's about where I would like to see it be. And then her last little hand, again with the dilapidated brush, pulling a little bit of that blue paint up out of there. I'm just going to go right in here, just over the palm of the hand where I've kept it kind of pale. And cover that pretty good. And then I'm going to pull out, particularly around the edges of the blue, I'm going to pull some of that back out. And I'm going to pull out any extra coloring that I don't like. So I really like the effect of this, so I'm pretty much done with this right now. And I'm going to go back to my foot. I'm going to stir up my blue wash again. I'm just going to paint on a layer of that blue wash. Really, it's giving an undertone of blue, but mostly it's interacting with the paint colors that are already present on the doll. And I'm going to hang that one to dry. Once again, just going to add this blue wash everywhere. If it starts to pool around the toes, be sure you pull it out with a dry brush, because if you don't, then you're going to keep that blue tint. And a little bit of blue is just fine, but too much blue can really ruin it. So I'm going to hang that one up. And I'm going to look again at my first leg. I'm going to pull out all this extra blue paint that's coming down out of there. And I'm okay with that the way that it is. It's not pooling in a way that I feel like it's going to dry to something that looks unrealistic. Then I'm going to go to the arms. I'm not going to go to the tips of the fingers with this. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tilt it forward and I'm going to stop at this last knuckle here. Because I want this part to look a little bit blue, not overly blue, but I don't want to take a chance on getting any blue coloring out onto the tips. So for the arms, I'm going to move toward the upper arm. My paint's going to run toward the hole in the limb. One thing when I hit this level and I'm working with the blues in this way, what I like to do is go ahead and put in place a little bit of blue veining up the arm. And you can see that that's pretty spotty. But you can tone it down and make it look much more realistic just by using the corner bristles, just the corner edges of the brush, the dry brush. And you can see that it looks like I have veins that move in different directions all the way up the arm. I really like that effect. I'm going to let that start to flash off. Again, I'm always looking back up at the hanger for any paint that's pooling or dripping. I'm going to just soak it out with one of my sponges. The last hand here, again, I'm not going to get the blue up on the tips of the fingers. I'm going to start at the second knuckle and move back. Did the same thing to the top of this hand, and all of my little drips of paint have now run together, and it's creating a nice little vein that I didn't have to work out. Pull out any of the extra blues there, and this limb is completely done. So that's going to need to flash off for a few minutes. And in the meantime, I'm going to pull Serenity out of the oven. Oh, look first. Okay, so this is what I mean about watching your drips, because we have a nice little pool going there. It's not a catastrophe though, because I want to use this little thick piece of paint. So I'm going to push the vein in that direction. I'm going to fade it out at the top here. I'm just going to leave a little bit of a hint of a vein there. Just a little tiny hint of a vein. And then I'm going to take one of these thicker brushes. I'm going to put it next to that vein. Not over it, but right next to it, because I just want to pull out the extra liquid. I don't want to undo that pretty natural vein that just popped up there. Then we're just going to look at her face. We're going to see if anything needs to be changed. Doesn't look like it does. So I'm going to continue to let her flash. Serenity is now out of the oven. She looks pretty good. You can see that her complexion's changed just a bit. It's really good. Got the nice modeling. Her creases look very nice, natural. Her skin looks very soft and squishy. That's what I wanted. And so now, what I'm going to be waiting for is for Serenity to cool down so that I can do anything extra that I want to do with her, which right now she looks like she's probably going to get this lighter blue wash, not the dark blue wash, but a light blue wash. And that's going to help to give it even more dimension. because I don't want it to be the dark blue because that looks a little too heavy. So I'm going to go with the lighter blue. I'm going to create a wash, and then I'm going to apply that in just a little bit. Right now, I'm kind of at a standstill because Liam has not flashed completely, and I don't want to put her in the oven until she has. Sometimes I put them in just a little bit damp, but if you're not really careful with that, what can happen is as the paint starts to flash off in the oven where it's hot, it's going to dry into lines, and those lines can look very strange. So I like to avoid that just by kind of paying attention and always giving the pieces an extra look before I stick them in the oven. I like to take the time to fade out anything that looks like something that I'm not going to want after the bake. So I continually work on fading out anything that I don't like while it's still flashing. So I may take her off the rack and put her back on several times, piece by piece. Once the sculpt is almost completely flashed, then you're going to know that, okay, it's probably not going to have any other reactions as far as like the paint dripping or anything like that. So at that point, then you would be able to just stick her in the oven and allow her to cure. Again, my NuWave oven, I use setting number 6, and I put her kits in for 8 minutes. And that seems to work really, really well. I'm still trying to get this camera right, so I'm sorry if it's kind of wonky. The lighting in here has been very difficult to control because I'm used to working under really bright natural light. But this camera that I got, it really shows up a lot of glare when I try to use the lights at the regular frequency. So I have kind of shaded them and brought the light down up to a little more acceptable level for the camera. I'm still not 100% sure about how it's going to show up online, but I guess we'll see. So forgive me if it sucks. I'm hoping to get better at this. I had been thinking about starting a live stream because I have so many customers who are just like, okay, you know, I'd like to see you make this baby, you know, or what are you working on today? And so I really wanted to give my website visitors and my customers a place to go where they could kind of access me more often than just through Etsy chat and Etsy and Facebook chat. So that's why I'm doing this. I want to be more accessible, and I really, you know, I love this artistry, and I'm hoping that I'm at the end of my PTSD flares. I'm a little more able to function than I was, you know, 2 months ago. It's still difficult some days. Some days I have a really hard time, you know, getting myself up and going. I have a lot of anxiety and panic, and mixed with some depression as well. But, you know, I don't want to be completely ostracized from the people that I care about and the people who order babies from me. So this is kind of my way of reaching out to you guys as I'm going through all of this therapy for my traumatic events and such. So I'm not about like sob stories, but you know, things happen to people, and you know, I had a lot of things happen to me that have kind of really put me into a less than desirable state of emotional and mental health. I am working through it though, step by step, day by day. But when this all started, which was back in June, there were weeks that went by that I couldn't even focus on making dolls anymore. It was just a complete mess. So I'm very thankful that I'm able to actually get back here and paint and enjoy the painting process and enjoy making these dolls. It's very therapeutic for me. And I always hope, as I've said in previous videos, I always hope that the dolls that I make will be therapeutic for other people too. When you guys get your babies, that you're gonna know that a lot of love was put into them. Because it certainly was. So I'm gonna put this Liam in. She's flashed enough now. I'm pretty confident that her coloring is going to stay just fine. She's not going to have puddles or creases that end up blue, anything like that. So I'm going to pop her in for another 8 minutes. I think this is about all that I'm going to have time to really show you guys today, so I'm going to be ending this live stream in just a few minutes. I do want to thank you for joining me and hanging out with me while I work. As always, I think the chat feature is enabled now. As far as I know, I enabled it. I tried. So you'd be able to like leave comments and ask questions and things that way. Also, if it's not active, if I goofed in some way, then absolutely just send me an email, littleblessingsboutiquedolls@outlook.com. Thank you again so much for being here. I really appreciate your support, and I look forward to broadcasting to you again probably tomorrow. Thanks, guys. Come on, Cook.